Alrighty, we got day 4 of Gino's little journey to greatness, and it will be ride number 3. We have a change of venue today. We're at a local indoor arena, and I sort of ideally wouldn't mind running him around the round yard before I brought him out in a bigger yard. So what we're going to do is let him have a run around this yard and investigate it on his own. He's hovering down the fence because his paddock mate was in the paddock on the other, in the little arena on the other side. So he's going to do a bit of this for a while. So we'll let him run around and investigate and get all the play out of him. We'll see how long that takes. We'll hope he doesn't think he's a show jumper, because that could be an issue. But I would often do this even when I got a round yard and a yard adjoining. I would let my horse, might start in the round yard and work around, but before I ride him in a big space or a bigger space like this, I would let them run around that big space and investigate it. Because obviously for a lot of horses, new arena, new pen, lots of room, they get really excited about it. So I'm going to try and work him around. And it's pretty much like when we worked in the round yard on day 1. He's going to run around and be goofy and look at things, and eventually he'll get sick of it and come back. So we're not trying to run him around and wear him out. I don't want any of that happening. But we do want him to finish investigating and playing before I get on. We also have a storm that's just passed nearby, so it might be a little bit looky because of that. No, we've already got a little look, so that's pretty cool. I might even back up, see if he wants to come out. But I know he hasn't finished playing, but we can have a little interval in the playtime where we can say hello. Hey, good boy. Have a little interval in the play where we just reassure him, it's just another day at the office. And then I'll send him off. It's kind of cool. He's pretty adamant, like, well, I don't really want to run around. I'd rather stay with you, Wayne. That'd be great. But I don't quite think he's finished playing, so I'd rather make sure he's finished playing before I do too much more and jump on. Because there's quite a bit here for him to be excited about today. Like I said, we had a storm pass. His mates running around the other yard, going crazy. So kind of going to move him around until everyone's settled. Mind you, I'm just thinking if he's gonna, not too fast, if he's gonna come in, that's cool. We might go ahead and saddle him up and then run him around again. Like I said, I don't think the playtime's out of him. But he might be looking to me for a little reassurance, so give him a little reassurance. We can always chuck, like I said, chuck the saddle on, And then I might run him around again. I talked on day one about, like it's always imperative to me that a horse follows. It depends on the horse and the situation. Like I know when a horse, and on day one he was turning and preparing to be caught. He wasn't ready to come walking out and marching out after me, but he was, or preparing to be caught. And through a little bit more follow-up work, like we can see today, he's like marching towards me at times. So that's very cool. Quick thoughts on, whether I tie a horse up. This horse has been tied up, but I wouldn't tie one to saddle up. If he needs to move, I'd rather him feel like he can move his feet and not get stuck. So it's kind of his decision to stay here in a lot of ways. And when it's his decision to stand, he'll generally do a much better job of it. Don't eat it. Have a quick look at it, but it's not for eating. He's probably going, it tastes like salty leather, pretty much like jerky. This place also is an adjustment property with a lot of horses out there behind the camera. So he has a lot of horses he's looking out for over the fence, which is a bit of another added distraction for him today. And he sort of wanted to head off when I was lunging him. He was just getting a little close, so I just raised my hand and asked him to be a little further away. Okay, that's all pretty square. Go up another hole. Didn't ask you to move just yet. So there's a very different thing between a horse feeling like he can move and I'm asking him to stay here, as opposed to me hobbling and forcing him to stay here, or tying him up and forcing him to stay here. Like mentally he feels like he can move and he's hanging around at my request. It's almost like he's allowing me to ask him to stand. There's such a big difference between making it impossible to move. As the old saying goes, probably first coined by Ray Hunt, but it might have been Tom Dorrance. Make the right thing easy and the wrong thing difficult. But one thing I got out of Ray Hunt at his clinic, it was like, make the right thing easy and the wrong thing difficult, but don't make the wrong thing impossible. And like when we hobble him and force him to stay here, or heaven forbid in the old days that we'd hobble and blindfold and everything else, you know, and you kind of force them to deal with it, it's such a different mindset for the horse, as you could imagine. Long term, of course, I'm going to tie him up to saddle up. You know, I'm going to go somewhere he needs to learn that. And after I handled his feet and I know he's comfortable with that, I'm also going to hobble his feet. And the only reason I would do that is like I talked about the other day when I had the rope around his legs. If, you know, heaven forbid he did get hung up in a fence and got stuck, I'd love to think that he just wouldn't panic and he'd stay there and he'd be good for us in the morning. So sometimes we're going to prepare him, but we're going to prepare him to deal with that ultimate where he can't move and things get very difficult. But it's a gradual process. It's like me talking yesterday about riding him. You know, and I ride him and I go from passenger to not doing much to doing a little bit more, and gradually bringing things in, and it's kind of, it comes in at a rate that he's happy with and all that kind of stuff. So, like I said, I still think there's a little bit more play. So we'll send him around again. So he's torn a little bit there between me and his mate. Oh boy. And it's kind of an interesting thing. You know, like I wouldn't go out of my way to do that if I had a really difficult horse. And when I say difficult, you know, someone that's just a little bit more reactive and bothered by the whole situation, as in being handled, saddled, ridden, etc. But this guy, because, you know, so far he's been really quiet, it's kind of good for him to maybe deal with some of these distractions at the same time. Because he's got a few choices to make. Does he stay with me or does he worry about what his mate's doing? Good boy. This one's an easy choice. Well, should be relatively easy because I'm on the same side as his friend. I'm also feeling he could do with just a little reassurance. Like he's, he's looked around and everything's a bit exciting. So a little bit of reassurance would be good at this point. Like I said, it's always a bit of a balancing act. There's a touch of bossing him around. Like if I was the lead horse, he would have to listen and take my lead. So I've got to go through that process of getting him to, yes, I'm going to boss you around a little bit, but then, I'm going to be nice. Like when you're nice, I'm nice. If you're not paying attention, then I'll be a little bit tougher to deal with. Good boy. Boy. So again, he's stuck between the two of us. He's got his friend on one side and me on the other. Anyway, I think he's probably had enough of that. We might see if we can turn it all down. We'll do a little desensitizing work. As we said, we can skim a little bit of that with him. Obviously by now, as you figured out, one of those things that I don't like to skim too much, even though we kind of know he hasn't shown any real reaction to this. It's just one of those number one things, like my leg is going to go there. So I want to make sure that his belly, where I'm going to be touching him, and my legs are just going to be tickling and bumping. I just want to make sure he's very happy with any sort of strange touches around his belly. So just double checking that. This is that one we played around with the other day. This is part of preparing. Like we said, maybe we'll hobble him, maybe he's going to get hung up in a fence, but one day that's going to be absolute. And to me, it's a little bit like teaching him to come forward off pressure and tying him up. If I teach him to come forward off pressure, and he's got that in his head, hopefully one day when it's really absolute and I tie him up, he might panic a little, but then realize, okay, there's pressure in front of me, I need to move in that direction to get rid of it. But it's not something we do on day one, because obviously we're going to get way more reaction we'd like. And he might hurt himself in the process. So he's pretty quiet, obviously. The main thing I've always sort of half thought about him is he might, you know, get a little cranky about being asked to go. Well, today he's got plenty of distractions and plenty of room, so going won't be a big issue. So unless there's a major scare, we should be okay. I also said in that first video, the day one, you know, some of these horses I take 2 weeks to get to the point where I do the first ride. I've never really taken any longer than that, but I don't run on day one on the ground. Day 2 I get on him, day 3 I ride out. I'll take as long as it takes where I'm happy that everything's working. And yep, I can skim a little with him because he's had some handling and he's pretty sensible. He also shows a hell of a lot of retention, where any lesson he's learnt, he pretty much keeps. And I've obviously, you know, I've worked some horses, and I'm sure you guys have too, where you do a lesson and they get it, understand it, and you got to do it over and over and over. And some days you come back and it's like 50 first dates where every day you feel like you're starting at zero. And those horses eventually get it, but they're obviously a lot more hard work than this guy. And everything we're going to do is usually a request followed by a demand. Unless of course he does it, and then it's just a request. So he's moving those hips over that side pretty good today. Some days I'll get up on the offside, but as his career continues, he's not going to be ridden necessarily by people who are used to doing that. As we know, most people hop on the near side all the time, so he could do either. So we're in a big pen. It's a little bit like when I rode him in the round yard on day one. There's going to be a bit of passengering involved. But you could also see he's walked straight off because he's got somewhere to go in here. You know, he's not going round and round the yard. He's got somewhere to go, so I haven't even asked him to go. He's just wandered off. Which is another reason I'm trying to get in this big yard, because I don't want to have an unnecessary argument. If I can just offer him room and he'll go forward, that's awesome. When he finds a place to stand, and yes, I could kind of feel it coming, so I figured he'd stand soon and we can check him out on all those weird things that people are going to do when they ride. Especially when they ride like a drunk person. Don't drink and ride, that's stupid. Especially on a young horse. So repetitions of day 1. Bit of desensitizing before we do anything too dramatic. He's got little cows to look at out in the paddock today. So day 1, some desensitizing, and then we asked him to move around a bit. Day 2, we bent him a little bit more. Today I might be bending him and moving his hip around just if he gets going too quick. I'm, to a large extent going to let him do what he kind of feels like doing. But if he's just going too quick, I don't really want him to get in the habit of that. Even on day 1, I'd like him to think, slow, steady, come to the rider to help me out. But what's also important on this horse, that day that he says, hey, I don't want to go forward, I'm calling the union. You've eaten too many donuts before you rode me. I'm not going to go cantering and carting you around. The day that he asks that question, I need to be pretty quick to say, well, no, you have to go. And not silly about it, where I've talked to some guys and the horse doesn't want to go forward, and he said, so I rode him for the next 20 kilometers to let him know that I'm the boss and he's got to go forward. So you rode him through his bad patch, let's say, and then he went a little bit more and he got acceptance. And then you did another 15 kilometers worth of enforcing why he hates people and why he doesn't want to go to work. If I have an argument, or a heated discussion, I'm going to do what's needed, come out the other side, do a little bit more, and then stop. It's like, well, the rider told me what I had to do, and he insisted, but he wasn't unreasonable about it. So we're just working, sacking him out. G'day, thank you so much for watching. If you could like, share, subscribe, turn on the notifications bell, that would be awesome. Thank you. Cheers. And sacking out and desensitizing has become such a trendy thing, I suppose. I sack them out on the stuff that I need to. There's going to be ropes and reins and hands and arms and legs. Most other thing I could do is maybe flap a raincoat around and stuff like that. But I try to stick to what's practical because I want to get on with the good stuff. And for me, the good stuff's riding and establishing all of these connections that I've made on the ground in the saddle. So he's being very cool about it all, so we'll go ahead and do what we did on day 2. We might just do a little bit of bending, holding him around, leg where my hand was when I was on the ground. Want his bum to yield, there we go. And then lead his front end out. Nice. And we'll flip, we'll try and flip that a little better. Bend. How you going? So the first thing I want him to do is stop and bend. And I'll reassure him that that's a great position to be in. And then move his hip out. And then lead his front end out. So one rein stop, and I'll do a video on all the reasons that you could use a one rein stop. But in his case, it's if anything too rowdy happens, I need him to be comfortable to okay, I got to stop and bend and not feel threatened. Because some horses, when you take the head around here, they kind of feel like you've made things a little difficult for them, and they get a little panicky. So that's why the first bit is stop, stand still, reassure, like this is a fine spot to be in, and you know, I'm here, and he gets a good look at me. And then we move on to that physical aspect of like, move your hind quarter, move your front. I talked on the last ride about why we use one lead. So he knows that lead's on his left. I'm going to keep it on his left for a while, especially when I go trotting and cantering. I'm not going to move it around too much. Again, we're gradually taking up controls and making more and more decisions. But today, of course, he's got all of this to look at and all of this to take in, as well as me. So he's got a little bit more to deal with anyway. So even when I get stuck there, it's obviously it would have been real easy to flip the lead on the right, lead him out to the right, but I took him left instead. I'm trying to keep things simple. Lead's on the left. The guy in the saddle's probably going to tip me left. When I go two reins, and it starts to be like, oh, left or right, left or right. You know, like it's just that little bit of added mental work for them. Which on this guy who's so quiet and easygoing, you know, that doesn't look like it would be a big deal. But it's almost like you're giving up a little bit of control while that horse is getting confident. And as he gets more confident, you take up more control as time goes on. And then we take up more and take up more and take up more, and I want to control every piece of him because, you know, I'd like to compete at a high level, and I've competed at a high level. So I've done a bunch of sacking out, a bunch of steering. We'll go ahead and tip him up into a jog, see what happens. I don't care too much about where he goes. He's already shown me he's not that fussed about jumping the fence. This fence is a little short for some horses, so you want to be a little aware of that. But again, he's just passengering. I'm just passengering with him today in a new location with a whole bunch of added distractions. And there'll still be, you know, times like that I'm going to make a few decisions. So today, while he's running around, I might just move my legs around a little, desensitize on the run, hold my arms out and hands out, and wiggle my lead rope and check all of that. So now we'll do a bunch to the right, and you kind of see, like, as soon as that lead rope went over his head, big cue to him that we're going to be going to the right. It was very cool, like he ran off that suggestion. I just held it out Never really had to pull on it. No, he's not taking that suggestion this time. That's okay. So again, I didn't kind of yank him through there. I just held it and waited for him to figure out where the pressure wasn't. The pressure's not there, the pressure's over there. So another one that's good, I've moved my legs around, I haven't changed my weight too much yet. It's another thing that's worth checking him out on. I don't think he sped up because of that, I think he sped up because he's something he saw out in the paddock. We might actually, because he has run around a bit on his own, give him a quick breather. Kind of showing me he'd like to stand still. While we're standing still, we can work a little on our back up. Although we're pretty close to the fence, so we don't want to get too close to that. Humid day, so I'll deal with that. So like I said, he's pretty lazy and laid back. So I'm going to make the cantering the last thing I do, as in, again, the cantering is where the ride finishes. So we've sacked him out, we've done all this stuff, we've done a bit of turning. We might end up doing more turning when we canter. So we'll do a little bit of counter work and hopefully, you know, he should step off up into it easy, which I'm expecting because he's got plenty of room. I don't want him to go, yeah, I got plenty of room and play, but hopefully got rid of all that play earlier. So let's give it a whirl. G'day, thank you so much for watching. If you could like, share, subscribe, turn on the notifications bell, that would be awesome. Thank you. Cheers. I'm going to come right up to the camera to say hello to everyone. We know he's kind of a showboat because he went down. They use this arena for dressage, and there's mirrors. And he spent a little time looking at himself in the mirror. So we had a couple of little protest votes then about going forward. It's like I said, that was going to happen at some point. So it's a good day for me to make him go forward a little bit longer. He can have a little break. And then I'll do one more session, because this is a tricky part about, those that are quiet, is they're not scared of anything that I'm doing. I have to make sure I keep the respect, and he goes to work when he's asked. And right then, when he's sort of protesting, if you're not willing to push and push and push and get him to go, you're going to have a really hard time later. Because it's like the first time he said, you know what, I don't really want to can around with you, you're kind of fat. If I bail, he's going to test that tomorrow. And tomorrow he's going to test it a little harder. And then the day after he's going to test it a little harder again. But right then, I just kept going and going until he was going free. And if he asks tomorrow, it won't be, I very much doubt it'll be as much. But he may go again in another 2 weeks or 6 weeks, once he's had a fair bit of riding. But again, it's not going to be much more than that. Right, let's walk off away from the fence. And posed enough for the camera again. So that was lead on the left and a couple of left turns at a canter. So this time it's going to be lead on the right, swatter on the left. We're going to swat him on the butt. And we might end up turning him at a canter a bit this way. So we'll just have one more little run and call it a day. So the last one was a bit harder. He obviously took exception to it. But like I said, we got to have this discussion about working. Whoa, now. Whoa. Like I said before, we do a little bit of like, well, I'm going to push him through it. Kind of prove my point in that if I ask, unfortunately, you're going to have to get it done. But after you've got it done, I'm not going to keep pounding around here for ages. Like, you've shown a willingness to go forward. You quit kicking out. You started to flow. So we'll just do a little bit and stop. So now we just let him stand a little bit. I might go for one more little canter. And hopefully it'll be little. It'll only be long if he kind of makes it longer. But this is the day where we sort of really start to establish a work ethic. And you can imagine, of course, if I backed off when he did that, he'd just do it worse and worse. But it's also the day where you see that he is a young horse and he hasn't been ridden much. Because like yesterday you would have said, well, hey, you've been riding him for 6 months and then you decided to do a video. today he's kind of showing all his young horse attributes. Cool, he stepped up into a jog on his own. Stepped up into a lope real easy. He's flowing really nice. Whoa. So yeah, he made those decisions for himself, and I'm gonna hop off him right there. So I'm not gonna hop off at the gate that we brought him in, because I don't want him thinking that gates are the best places in the world. The people are down there watching, that's not the best place in the world. You know, middle of the pan, you've done your job, that's where the ride ends. So yeah, he's run down here and he's been really cool. So we'll let him stop there. He stepped into a trot, stepped into his canter really nice. We'll pop off him. Loosen the girth here. I did that yesterday, I didn't mention it, but obviously loosening the girth straight away. Let him know it's all over. He can rest, breathe easy. Give him a little pat, because he's doing the best he can with the human he got stuck with. Because as we know, like we're the ones who make the mistakes. The horses, you really just reflect what we're doing. And sometimes it's because of what we're not doing, sometimes it's because of what we are doing, but they're just reflecting us and what we're capable of and what we want to do. So we'll bring him up here and we'll say cheers for the day, and we'll come back tomorrow. G'day, thank you very much for watching. I do really appreciate it. This video of Gino's journey is meant to be more of a entertainment video, not educational, as in it's not a how-to video. All horses react and start differently. If you are going to attempt to start your own horse, you really need to enlist the help of a seasoned professional, or get a seasoned professional to do your horse for you and get them started. It's not an easy job, and it's not a job to be taken lightly, because this is your horse's introduction to the rest of his riding career, and it's really not to be messed with. So take it for what it is. It's a lot of fun to watch. It's been a lot of fun to share, and I really appreciate that you've taken the time to watch it and that you'll keep watching the channel. Thank you very much. Cheers.